my decision.
Harrison Mann, Jewish American, U.S. Army major, recently resigned from the Defense Intelligence Agency over the Biden administration's policy in Gaza. That does it for our show. To see others who have resigned, our interviews, go to democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
Hi, this is Al McFarlane, host of the Conversation with Al McFarlane. You're listening to 90.3 FM, KFAI, Minneapolis. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Tuesday, our live broadcast here on KFAI and our live stream. We're streaming across several platforms. They include YouTube, 2 YouTube channels, the one channel for National Newspaper Publishers Association, we call it the Black Press USA, and on the Insight News MN channel. We're also streaming this program live to Facebook, 3 different channels, the Al McFarlane page, the Black Press USA page, and the Insight News page. We're streaming to LinkedIn and to Twitter. The point is, however you're connecting with us, we are so pleased and happy that you're with us here in Radio Land or even online, kfai.org. A global footprint, so you could be anywhere in the world. So you know what? Wherever you are, let us know that you're there. Send us a note in the comment section. If you're on any of the streaming platforms, shout yourself out, your town out, your community, your issues out. We want to connect with you and celebrate you and what you are focusing on. We want to also say that the program is sponsored by the One Door Home Ownership Expo, which is going to be held on June 22nd at 1256 Penn. That's the Thor building. This event is free, and you can learn all you need to know about the path to homeownership. One day coming through one door. So that's the idea. One Door to Homeownership Expo, June 22nd at 1256 Penn Avenue, Plymouth and Penn, the Thor building. So let's begin. And on Tuesdays, we are always blessed to have our colleague and our friend, Coach Leah Jane, talking about the world of sports. Coach Leah, how you doing? There she is. Hey, Coach.
Hi there. Hi there. So I thought I was going to join you a little later, but this is fine. I love being here on Tuesdays. I love that we're simulcast with KFAI radio, and I'm just always just excited to talk sports. And so thank you for this time today. Where do we want to start? Where do we want to start? There's so much going on.
Well, you take it. I'll follow you. You're my sports expert, and so I am pleased to follow your lead. Where are we going?
Okay, so why don't we talk about the NBA playoffs first? And we've got, of course, the 2 teams. We've got the Dallas Mavericks taking on the Boston Celtics. And I was wanting to know maybe if we could get some predictions as to, at this time, who is going to, win the finals. The Mavericks seem to be just a little short-handed, even though in their backcourt they've got, tremendous guards and tremendous guards in the backcourt. But I wanted just to talk about Porzingis, Kristaps Porzingis, and he's been out for almost the whole season. But in his first game, he was able to score 18 points after recovering from an injury. And so I think that was a huge surprise for a lot of people that he was able to come back and make an impact in the way that he did. And what I will want to do is I will want to circle back to talk about some of the guard play that is happening there. But I think a lot of people are tuning in, but a little, I don't want to say half-heartedly, but there's a huge distraction of the NBA playoffs. And in my opinion, it is an amazing, huge distraction. And that is the WNBA.
That's right. Okay.
Going on in the WNBA right now, where we've got, of course, Caitlin Clark, who is playing for Indiana, and she's a rookie, and she is definitely feeling those rookie pangs, as we will call them, and well deserved. And we've got also a lot of people just, that don't know a lot of, in my opinion, don't know a lot about women's basketball, don't know a lot about the WNBA, have just now become fans of the WNBA, or not even fans, observers. Let's just call them that, because I think you have to like something when you're a fan, right? So they're observing, and they're observing just because they're curious, as opposed to they like what they see and they support what they see and have knowledge of the women's game and the WNBA. And so, we kind of, as sports journalists and as former players, many of us that wear both of those hats are feeling very happy that there are so many eyes on the game right now. But we're also very disheartened in the fact that you have people making comments and statements that are that can kind of derail what has been built over these past well over 25 years already.
So what happened? So tell us what happened. The big news is what? What's the headline on this?
The big news right now, and
Caitlin,
is the fact that Caitlin Clark did not make the Olympic team.
How come? How could that happen?
Well, that could happen because she's not ready. You've got people that are on so you've got people that are selecting the Olympians that know what it takes at this point in the Olympic level of the world, that has literally caught up to the United States now, and it's in some places it has surpassed. I would definitely say that on the men's side, the success of how we're competing on the world stage, right? And so the women's have won 7 in a row. They want to go for 8. And so why would they select a popular player? Yes, more eyeballs might be on the Olympic Games, but I don't believe that the Olympics itself as a game is using basketball or even women's basketball as a way to generate money. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's different. It's not like professional sports per se in the States or anywhere else in the world. It's not where you're using that platform to raise money or to, an investor is like, I'm going to invest in the Olympics and get my return on investment. That is not how that works for the Olympics. And so, again, you have a lot of people that are making these comments and talking about, well, if Caitlin Clark would have made the team, it would have been more eyeballs and marketing would have, been able to, advertisers would have been able to. That is not how the Olympics works. I mean, yes, it is a business, televising the Olympics, covering the Olympics. Yes, you definitely want to not make money or not be able to produce an Olympics game, but you're not relying on the eyes on the women's basketball game or games to do that, right? And so, however, by the United States saying that they have won 8 straight Olympic Olympic gold medals, is a big deal.
Yeah,
that's historic. That fact will never go away. And so that's kind of what, in a nutshell.
That's proof of concept for their strategy of selection and winning. Listen, let me have you hang out a second. I want to bring in somebody else, 2 other people And I hope you've got the whole hour to hang out with me, Coach, if you can, or as much as you can.
I'd be delighted.
Okay, great. And our friend Thomas Berry from Black Civic Network is here. But before I bring him back on with you, I want to pivot to bring in another guest today. You know, this is Juneteenth week. A lot of great stuff is happening around Juneteenth. One of the people responsible for acknowledging and elevating culture and cultural awareness is the commissioner of the Minnesota Humanities Center. That's Kevin Lindsay. Kevin Lindsay, welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. How you doing, my friend?
Al, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for you making some time for me today.
Well, thank you for showing us some appreciation by joining us. And so let me start with Humanities Center 101. What is Minnesota Humanities Center, and talk about it in a way that puts in perspective the particular inspiration you have to bring culture in general and Juneteenth in particular forward.
Sure, Al. So I've now been the CEO of the Minnesota Humanities Center for 5 years. Formerly, before that, I was a commissioner of human rights. And as a commissioner of human rights for within the state, I saw that there was a need to make sure that people understand the beauty and humanity of all people to move them forward. So, yes, it's important to have laws on the books, but it's also important to make sure that you're speaking to humanity and value that everyone sees in each other. So within that, when the position became open for this at the Minnesota Humanities Center, I saw it as an opportunity to build upon some of the things I was doing at the state. Every state has a humanities department. We're all affiliates to the National Endowment for the Humanities. So some of us on a Sunday might catch a film by Ken Burns on jazz or baseball. So similar to the National Endowment for the Humanities as the state affiliate, we fund films, we fund books, we fund cultural celebrations, we fund the exploration of what it means to be human. I like to think of the humanities, you can think of them as academic disciplines like religion and history, civics and jurisprudence. They all boil down to storytelling. The storytelling that helps us make sense of the families that we're born in, or the families that we call our friends that we make during the course of our lifetime. The stories that help us make sense of the communities that we live in, or the stories that we help us make sense, if you think about a judicial decision, of the laws in the society in which we live in. They're all about storytelling, and as human beings, those stories help us make sense of the world. So for me, the Minnesota Humanities Center, given some of the conversations, some of the things that have been happening over the last 10 years, I think it's really important for us to remember the humanity that we see in each other, and also be very sharp as it relates to stories that guide us going forward. I think, unfortunately, we kind of lost our way in some of those instances.
One of the recent activities and what's on the plate at your shop?
So some of the things that we've recently done, we recently received funding from the Minnesota legislature through the Legacy Amendment. The Legacy Amendment funds culture throughout the state of Minnesota. It also funds water and parks and things of that nature. But the piece concerning art and culture is very important. So appreciate the efforts of Representative Sumaka Hussein and individuals such in the Senate as Bobby Joe Champion and others to provide funding for cultural heritage grants. This past 2-year cycle, we have given about $12.5 million worth of grants. In particular, as to cultural heritage grants, it's a little over $9 million. So that has resulted in us providing funds to support cultural exploration for the Rondo Land Trust. Over 300,000 will be going to them. Memorialize the movement. We'll receive more than 175,000 to support its efforts. Twin Cities Rise will also.
What is Memorialize the Movement? What is that?
Memorialize the Movement is to memorialize the site, the location, the activities in and around African Americans, seeing and how to understand the death of Mr. George Floyd, and how we can turn this from a moment into a movement. Other organizations such as Twin Cities Rise, working with individuals who were formerly incarcerated. Groups such as the Link as well will receive funding. We'll also receive funding The Black Youth Network in St. Cloud, Minnesota, will also receive. They'll receive about $250,000 in a variety of different activities to support Black youth in the St. Cloud area. This was the very first time for the Minnesota Humanities Center being able to give gifts or grants over $150,000. So really appreciate the legislative effort of Senator Fong Her and others to make that happen.
What was the history before your tenure? My assessment, Kevin Lindsay, is that the general focus was generally white, that there had not been an intentionality or a specific charge toward inclusion. That inclusion was kind of at the margin, like Black life and cultural reality have been at the margin, except for in the past 10 years, things have changed. Let me tell you a story. Once when we created the Minnesota Multicultural Media Consortium, this back in 1990s, I convened owners of Black, Asian, Latino, Native American media to talk about doing health education around the HIV/AIDS crisis. When we approached the Minnesota Department of Health about reaching out to our specific cultural communities, their attitude was, we communicate to the Star Tribune, the Pioneer Press, mainstream media, and that any of your people that read probably are reading the daily white papers. And that was an offensive posture, but that was the official posture. We met it again and again and again, state resistant to acknowledging our culture, the validity of our cultural realities, in favor of and insisting that we find a way to shape ourselves into being white people. Hopefully that's changed. What do you think?
Well, I appreciate the example. And in my former position as commissioner, that was one of the things that I sought to work on, is to broaden the way administrative agencies reached out with their messaging, and also to make sure that they weren't just coming to community after decisions had been made, but more on the front end before decisions had been made, and actually part of the envisioning and the ideation of strategies going forward. So yes, this work is important. I appreciate your efforts in the past, and I'm continuing to try to do more of that when I can, and working not just at the state, but the city and the county levels as well. We have a program called We Are Water as an example of that. Try to be intentional on water stewardship issues, and we try to center local voices within that, even though there are going to be state partners within that space. And there's a host of areas. The area that you're talking about with healthcare is one that we're actually in the process now of formulating how we might be able to work with governmental entities and bringing about a more holistic way of doing it. As to the Humanities Center, I would say we've tried to bring more intentionality to working with all communities. Our vision is a just society that's curious, connected, and compassionate. I tell people curiosity is where we come to conversations with open hearts, open minds to hear and listen to one another sincerely. Connectedness is the idea that Dr. King reminds us that we're tied to a garment of mutual destiny. What impacts one impacts all. And then compassion. It's important to have empathy, but empathy is a noun. What we need is verb, and a verb is compassion, to actually act upon what we've heard from our fellow citizens. So within that space, that requires us to be intentional and looking across to all people. So we're trying to bring some intentionality with ethnic studies. Really appreciate Judge Lejeune Lang's effort to work with charting Black history for students within Minnesota, and particularly Minneapolis. Appreciate the work that we're doing with the Shakopee Mdewakanton, doing 9 more books in the Native American book series. So the list goes on for us, and we're very excited about the promise of having Minnesota really lean into ethnic studies in a meaningful way to really have every child be able to see themselves in their education.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest is Kevin Lindsay. He is the CEO of Minnesota Humanities Center, a job he's held since 2019. Prior to that, he was the commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, and as such, a member of the governor's cabinet. He's a change maker, and his passion is all about inclusion, leveraging the power of personal stories, finding solutions to complex problems building a stronger democracy. So now we're at Juneteenth, and what is going on? What is MHC, Minnesota Humanities Center, doing around Juneteenth?
Well,
I think there we go.
so this idea of talking about independence and the Declaration of Independence, by the way, we're coming up on 250 years, a history for the Declaration of Independence. It's a time for us to really do a deep examination of the people who have been excluded within that and people who have really sought to realize the full ideas, power of those respective words. And one community is the African American community. We've now celebrated Juneteenth and recognized it as a federal holiday. Congratulations to Opal Lee and realizing her dream. The state of Minnesota in the last couple of years, we've now recognized it. The Minnesota Humanities, and tied with the federal, has started to have a three-part program. One, the play Kumbaya, the Juneteenth story, written by humanities officer Rose McGee more than a couple of decades ago. Fantastic play. We're proud to be able to bring that play to new audiences. We're going to be at the Northrop Auditorium on the 21st of this month. We're also going to host a breakfast with a powerhouse speaker, Bakari Sellers. He will be at the St. Paul Event Center on the 20th for breakfast at 8 o'clock. I'm really excited about the interview conversation with him last year. This is one of the nice things about this job, Al. I got a chance to interview Dr. Bernice King from the King Center last year, and now following up with Bakari. So it's a nice benefit to have within this position.
That's huge.
And then we're going to be releasing and premiering a new film about Minnesota's history. And this is Juneteenth, Minnesota's African American history. And this is in partnership with our good friends at OMG and Monique Linder. That will be fantastic as well. That'll be released on the 19th. There'll be another showing at the St. Paul Library on the 22nd. And then we're already receiving requests to bring that film to other audiences. So for us, uplifting the story of African Americans, challenging sort of some of the preconceived notions that we've had about them being fully included within democracy, and hopefully charting a path forward to more fully recognize our rights, liberties, and making that check for insufficient funds fully funded, as Dr. King reminds us on the March on Washington.
Coach Leah is in Texas. She joins us from there, but she's from here. And Coach, you had some comments about understanding the significance of Juneteenth, which you really, got turned on to when you moved to Texas. Thomas Berry is also here. And Thomas Berry, you've been an advocate of civic engagement and cultural enrichment. So let me have both of you weigh in this conversation with Kevin and Lindsay. Coach Leah, first of all, your thoughts.
So I remember celebrating Juneteenth in the Twin Cities, growing up and then having it being a wonderful time of celebration. There were always, it was just that time for both Minneapolis and St. Paul to just really get together on both sides of the river and really enjoy the festivities around Juneteenth. But what I didn't know was what we were celebrating. And I don't know how that was missed. And I feel kind of badly because I was in, as an adult then, I was in the education space and really tried to pride myself in teaching and promoting the teaching of our legacies, of our history, and so on and so forth. But that somehow it just went right over my head. And when I moved here was when I truly, truly understood the breadth of why Juneteenth is what it is today. And, it's disheartening because, again, I like to think I'm woke per se. I like to think that I was somebody who grew up, being in a place that was predominantly white, but loving the fact that I was Black, loving the fact that, as a community, we would be able to come together and do things, but we just didn't have the knowledge of why Juneteenth was so important. And so I guess that leads me into a question. What are we doing better now to educate our young people, because again, this is something that should have been in the books, should have been taught in elementary, middle school, high school, and was not. So what are we doing better now?
Kevin, what do you think?
Well, I really appreciate that question, Coach. So, Dr. Christopher Lehman from St. Cloud State just recently published a book called Slavery in the North Star State. And within it, he talks about the history in Minnesota when it was a territory to when it first became a state. And there's a good interview between myself and Dr. Lehman in the film, in which we talk about the tension in the state of Minnesota of whether it should come in as a slave state or as a free state. And we talk about Dred Scott, which some kids might have read about within books, but many have not read about the story of Eliza Winston. And he just recently published a book on Eliza Winston. So after the Dred Scott decision and after Minnesota had come into the Union as a free state, Eliza sued for her freedom in Minnesota and was awarded her freedom in Minnesota because Minnesota at that time was a free state. If some people have heard that's part of the story, they probably have not heard the following thing, which I'm going to say, and that the innkeeper that had rented out a place to stay for the Christmases were the individuals who were enslaving Eliza. He called for a riot of various folks within Minnesota, even though Minnesota was a free state, to ensure that she remained an enslaved person. So this tension is very real within it. And I would hearken that some folks would probably say, when there's a step forward for Black Americans, there's always tension and wanting to take a step back. And even when the law is clearly stated of what our rights are, there's still some folks that are willing to challenge within that space. So these stories, I think, are important for us to know. They're important to understand how resilient and how powerful our ancestors were. And hopefully that allows us to draw upon that for strength. But it also provides us with a guide on how to navigate going forward, because there are some of the strategies that we have to understand even when we make progress. So we make sure that that progress stays going forward and that we don't fall back.
Let me bring two more voices in before you have to leave, Kevin. One is Thomas Berry, who has been working, among other things, on the legislation to support Black families, Black heritage, legacy families, and who's also been involved in the important conversation about reparations here in Minnesota and around the world. And I also want to introduce you to my colleague, editor of Afrodescendientes, Mestre Yogi Sena, who joins me every week from Bahia in Brazil. And the idea behind this collaboration with Brazil is that we, Yogi and I and our team, are connecting African people, Afro-descended people from Portuguese, from Spanish, from other language traditions, including Swahili and Somali, so that we have a place to discuss common interests, common aims. That's important on the one hand. At the same time, it's equally important that we not lose sight of the unique relationship between what Thomas Berry would call, I think, foundational African Americans, those who are the direct descendants of slavery in North America or United States. Thomas Berry, thoughts, feelings, questions for the commissioner?
Well, I like the idea of what they're doing, but I do question the idea when white dollars get invested into Black issues, how we go to the far corners of the earth from each other. Juneteenth typically was celebrated in North Minneapolis as a institute of the community for the Black folks in Minneapolis and St. Paul and the surrounding suburbs to come together. This year, we've seen over 20 plus Juneteenth events, some going at the same time, which to me is indicative of what got us in bondage in the first place. We broken up into tribes, we started speaking different languages, and we couldn't understand each other to fight off the white enslavers to begin with. So I don't understand. I get the idea of wanting to do things out of a good faith, but I do believe that it has brought us further apart. And sometimes that happens when you put white dollars in Black issues. And I do also think the elitist side of a lot of these things. A lot of these events are happening where the Black elites are leading them, and the common everyday Black folk don't have access to these dollars to organize anything. Some of these events that we're talking about are some of the people who are coming in. I don't believe we're doing a great enough job educating the folks, as Coach Leah was saying, about what Juneteenth is about. I was one of those teens who celebrated Juneteenth in the 90s, and I seen a lot of my peers get murdered. I seen a lot of folks showing up, and we were celebrating to dance, eat food, and for me, it was to get girls' phone numbers. If I'm being honest, that's
That
what I
part.
was there for. But I didn't know what I was there celebrating. And they, in most of these events, still to this day, they're talking about everything else except what are we celebrating. And so to me, sometimes when you swell can be a sign of unhealthiness as well, as if you got a swollen foot. So I like the idea of everybody celebrating Juneteenth, but I do miss the idea of us having a collectivism amongst ourselves to celebrate who we are, what we are, and using it as a resetting point, as our ancestors did after 1865 to go into Reconstruction, so that we can tackle those things as Brother Kevin was talking about. But if you put us into 4 different corners of the earth and we're not celebrating amongst each other, we can't do that. That only happened after we got free and we came together to move throughout the Midwest and the South to build, over 65 towns, to have a flood of politicians enter into the political race, so we can get policies to build our own schools, to build our own churches and our own businesses and things of that nature. That's what we should be celebrating.
Thomas, can we, though, deal with the connectivity of our people in the 4 corners? Here's why I'm raising the question. I watched over the weekend a documentary. Maybe it was somebody that's one of the vloggers, travel vloggers, but he went to follow the trail of the Black Seminoles, who were Africans who
Yes.
had connected with the Seminole Indians, right, in
Yes.
Florida, and who were part of the Trail of Tears into Texas, and who from Texas migrated, sought freedom, escaped, and fought their way into Mexico. And this one community, and I'm sorry I can't remember the name of it, I'll come back to it, that this brother was trying to find his way to do his vlog about Afro-Mexicans, right? When he got there, he said what he discovered is that June 19th is almost a holy day in that community. And so these are African people, Black people, coming out of our shared slavery experience, but operating in Mexico and embodying and giving life to the idea that something happened that moved them and us towards the freedom. Juneteenth symbolizes that. Yogi, let me have you jump in real quickly and then have Commissioner respond. What about the question of freedom and our common struggle against supremacist ideology and colonial settler mentality? Yogi, what do you think?
Well, as Brother Barry said, certain things is not really changing. We here in Brazil just also came out of the month of the celebration of the abolition of slavery here. The national date is being May 13th, which is the date that the last regent princess of Brazilian Empire abolished slavery. Reminding that along with Cuba, there was the last 2 countries that abolished slavery in the Americas. Brazil was in 1889. So last year, got instituted a new date to celebrate Black heritage here in Brazil. That's November 20th. That's the Zumbi Day. That is more in tune now with the sentiments of the Black population, where this official May 13 has been the government official celebration of this not so much abolition, because the conditions of slavery is difficult to compare, but still in Brazil it's very latent, much more than the United States. One, because of the nature of the countries a bit older than the United States. The cities are 200, 300, 400 years old. So we, like me, I walk daily in the same streets that my ancestors that were enslaved walked, and that they helped to build. So this issue of you know, um, for me, for example, when I arrived in the U.S. in the 1992, was one of the great highlight of the year was Juneteenth in North Minneapolis. Be able to see the community, see how, this large amount of black people all together in one place. But it took years to me really understand the significance of that event, because as the brother has said, we talk about everything, but what really that they meant and what it means. Uh, and again, it's an unofficial commemoration of slavery created by the community as the Day of Zombies here. So, but in this note, I got to recognize that advancements are being done, very short, very little. Sometimes seems to be insignificant,
Mhm.
because we have this anxiety that we want the situation of our people to really change in a more substantial form. But things are improving, and we just need to keep pushing to the celebrations, to the changes, to be really effective, and to reflect the the feelings of the present population. Also, those commemorations needs to be an educative uh, event, right? For the young ones that are in elementary school, high school, to know the significance and the responsibility of us to keep those memories and those commemorations alive and positive,
Let me get
because
Commissioner Lindsay to respond. He's got to leave in a couple of seconds here, but Commissioner, got a lot of voices here, great voices and great analyses. What are your impressions and thoughts? And before I have you say that, one example again is when the Black Press of America had its annual convention here several years ago. It's back when the first year after the Barack Obama took office running. His commissioner of commerce came and addressed our group, and what he said to us, which is real short, is that when we took power, we didn't realize how much money and how much power was moving through our governance. Commerce, he said, billions of dollars. And now we are in a position to influence the flow. And so I say that to you, Kevin Lindsay, because you have demonstrated both at Human Rights and now at the uh, organization you're leading now, the Humanities Commission. It makes a difference who's both creating and who's enacting the policy. So what can we expect as we move forward with people like Kevin Lindsay in positions to call shots differently? Unmute, Kevin. Unmute. There we
Okay,
go.
there we go.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you said there. So for folks, again, the spending at the state for U.S. Bank Stadium, Senate, the state capitol, all of those saw 3 times as much participation from African Americans during the time. And some of that, Al, is, again, just directly attributable to who's calling the shots. But it's not just me. It was folks like Alex Tittle and Keith Baker also playing significant roles within that spot. As to the comment about making sure that we're not divided within this space, we try to bring a lot of intentionality. So we're actually one of the sponsors for the Juneteenth events in North Minneapolis, and then we're also a sponsor for Nika event over in St. Paul. So there are other events. We view our role within supporting the Juneteenth events is really uplifting and amplifying the history and the education, and trying to support the other Juneteenth events. It was said by Angela Tate, the women's curator for the Smithsonian African American Museum. It's got to be more than just the celebration where we're eating hot dogs and hamburgers and ribs and things of that nature. It has to have an
Or getting
education
girls' phone
component. It has to
numbers.
build us together. Right.
Right.
Phone numbers, right. So to the extent that we can bring some intentionality and support the various Juneteenth efforts, we're going to try to continue to do that. I really appreciate the call out about slavery around the world. A lot of folks in the United States don't know that there are Juneteenth celebrations around the world.
Mhm.
So we'll probably be doing some films and more education on that point as well going forward. There's not one stop, one thing does this all. It's more than 400 years, so there won't be 400 years to reverse it all, but it all won't be reversed in just one night either. So we all have to understand the part that we can play and also be supportive of the other brothers and sisters that are trying to do great things to uplift the community.
Well, I was so pleased to have you and Yoji on the same program, because Yoji is helping me lead this concept of Afrodescendientes, where we do stories, pick a story. Our principal writer is a brother named Jesus Chucho Garcia, who's in Venezuela, Afro-Venezuelan, and he talks about the affairs of liberation for Black people as a Pan-Africanist. But he's local to what's happening in different capitals and different cities and communities, Cimarrones, he calls them. And so what we're doing is creating a platform to share and spread that knowledge about our successes, where they have happened around the planet. We think they all connect and empower and enable each other. So we'll be reaching out to you, as you know, Kevin, to have you support what we're doing in Afrodescendientes. I think we lost Kevin. He had another meeting to jump into, but thank you, Kevin, Lindsay, for being here on the program today, and check out all the work that they're doing. Let me continue with Thomas Berry and Yoji and Coach Leah. You were going to do some more things on sports, Coach Leah. We didn't finish up the things we had listed, and I know that Thomas, you're a sports guy, I think, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
So
for sure. Sure. I love
you're knowledgeable, and Yoji is also an athlete, an expert, a martial arts expert. So we can just have this conversation flow. Leah, go with you, and then Thomas. I want you to take the time you need to explore several ideas. And if we can't get it all in right now, we're going to keep coming back till we keep getting the messages out about legacy, about family, about civic engagement, and beyond.
Mhm.
So I will just jump in and make a smooth segue to say this. Kevin kind of put out a call to action before he left us, and in our lanes, what can we do? And so I know with my platform, I can continue to make, because it just so happens that women's sports, primarily women's basketball, have been the lead in current times with social justice. And so it just so happens that our organization called Girls United was asked to uh, produce a celebrity fashion show during WNBA All-Star Weekend. What a wonderful time to also bring out this notion of how can we be better in educating Black history year round, because we are Black history. 90% of the league is Black. so so that's one thing that I vowed to do. I definitely will do that, because I've said in my years of starting being an expert in youth programming that the sports is just the carrot. It's just the thing that gets your attention. Now, guess what I get to do once I've got you in my space? I get to teach you about everything else that's really, very important for life. So there's that. Thomas, I look forward to talking with you further about how we can help each other and elevate the concept of, it's not about dividing, it's about how can we make sure we're always collaborating for the greater good. So there's that. But I wanted to go ahead and pivot back to again, when you kind of talk about legacy a little bit. So you guys are aware that the Minnesota Timberwolves have been quote unquote for sale. Alex Rodriguez and Laura, I can't remember his first name right now, are a group that owns 36% of the franchise, right? Well, this deal was first done, I think, 3 years ago. Well, now Glenn Taylor, who I'm a huge fan of his, by the way, has had a change of heart because, of course, not only was it brought back to their remembrance that the WNBA Minnesota Lynx have won 4 championships, tied with the Houston Comets. The Timberwolves had an amazing season, and they're going where we want them to go, you know. And so there's been this stall on what's going on with the ownership and the sale of the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Lynx. And so I would love to know what you guys are thinking about that at this time.
Well, you put out 2 questions early on. You talked about getting feedback on the men's playoff. So maybe Thomas Berry and Yoji Suna can make a comment on that, but also Thomas Berry, Yoji, about the question Coach Leah just posed about, the dynamics, the issue of the sale of the Timberwolves Lynx organization. Thomas Berry, what do you think?
Well, I think Glenn Taylor realized that someone else showed that he didn't have to use the nepotism that he was using, hiring all of his friends to be general managers and coaches, etc., running the franchise into the ground. And when he got the group with Alex Rodriguez and this other gentleman, and now Bloomberg is now entering into that buyership group, he's seeing that, hey, what I thought was a lemon is actually, an oasis of wealth that's soon to come. So he's trying to walk it back. He's welching on his agreement. That's what he's doing. But I believe that he should, I think he should be forced to sell because, let's be honest, he was just living off of the revenue sharing of the other owners up until this point. Now that they have a great team and they're going in a great direction, if they allow him to get back into that control, he doesn't know how to operate it. The other thing that I would say too is, because you talked about the women's sport and you talked about Caitlin and this thing about the Olympics. One thing that I do love about the ladies sport compared to the men's sports is that the men's sport is full about what is going to be talked about on talk television. The ladies sport is about, if you don't try out when the Olympic team is trying out, you won't be there. And they want to send the best 12 players that they could possibly send, not the most famous 12 players that they could possibly send. And one last point about this Caitlin talk. I find it embarrassing the way the Black men have been carrying themselves on sports talk, talking about Caitlin in the direction of Black women, calling them jealous and envious, and saying that she's the golden goose. The reality of it is that the WNBA is putting out a great brand of basketball. It's competitive, it's tough, it's hard-nosed, and it's very skillful at the same time. The women game is rising because the men's game is sinking because they're manipulating the game to get more points, and the average basketball fan can see that.
So what's in it for the Black talking heads, the Black sports announcers and sportscasters that, as you say, are denigrating the Black women in the league, calling them jealous and petty for not rallying around Clark?
Well, they got some things in common. They like to dance in the snow from time to time. The ones that are and they may see their daughters closer to Caitlin than they would Asia Wilson and some of these other sisters in the league.
Leah, go ahead, Leah. What do you think?
So, first of all, the issue is that Caitlin Clark herself knows that she stands on the shoulders of Cheryl Swoops, Tina Thompson, Cynthia Cooper. She knows that herself, and she has said it so many times. And it's about the narrative. Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons why I got out of sports news back in almost 30 years ago. I keep dating myself, but I'm just saying. Because it's not about it can't always be about the narrative. It has to be about the truth. It has to be about the history. And that's the thing that again is so disheartening to me, because they want there to be this Caitlin Clark versus the WNBA, and it's not that at all. But they're pushing that narrative, and then what a lot of people are saying right now too is that sports is just a microcosm of society. Well, guess what? We actually have a chance to make a difference because of that. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I want to
Well,
say.
what I hear in that is the Great White Hope Syndrome, right? And this just takes me back to Ali and all the battles he had, where they were always looking for somebody. Ali, Joe Louis, all of them. They wanted somebody white to show that they were the master of the universe, and did all they could to prep and condition, fool the public about white exceptionalism, and present mediocrity as a bait and switch. Yogi, what do you think? And let me throw one more thing in. I think I should be impressed by Josh. Have you followed Josh Gibson's story, Yogi, or Thomas, or Coach Leah?
Oh yes, yes.
No, no, I
Uh,
haven't.
well, let me ask Thomas to just synopsize briefly what's going on in baseball and Josh Gibson.
Well, I would tell you, baseball. What I love is baseball is coming back,
Mhm.
and I will tell you, basketball better be careful.
Hmm.
We're talking about this thing with Caitlin, and these commentators don't see it. Baseball started honoring the Negro League stats for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a chance, read Bill Rhoden's book, The $40 Million Slave, where he warned basketball and football players this sport, these sports will not belong to African Americans soon. But baseball is learning the lesson. And they're saying we're going to go back, we're going to honor these stats, we're going to start propping up these black baseball players because they know the sport was more exciting when African Americans were playing the sport. So they're going to lionize all of whether it's the past or the current. And look, I wouldn't be shocked, y'all. I wouldn't be shocked if certain days will be honored to some of those greats in the past. So Josh Gibson, the conversation about him being brought up and why they're bringing it up is because they're telling us, whispering loud as possible, come home. This is the league without the salary cap. This is the league where you can make $400 million and they won't be talking about you the way they do LeBron. This is the league where if you 5'7", you can still play as long as you can catch the ball and hit the ball, right? This is the league that we want you. And so I love what they're doing with baseball right now. I love the enthusiasm and the conversation, and we're not seeing it in other sports where
So what does it mean if they're knocking down the icons? I mean, they're not knocking them down, but they just put them in proper perspective. So Babe Ruth was just Babe Ruth. Yeah, Mickey Mantle was only Mickey Mantle, right? But
right.
neither of them was the greatest player. And as it turns out, by their systems of measuring, what they've excluded, brought to light, shows greatness resided somewhere else. It resided in our people.
But you have to do that.
As always.
You have to do that.
Mm.
You have to do that in order to bring us back, because
Uh-huh.
that's a conversation now that the sports writers have to write. They have to talk about it. They have to examine. And now black children get to find out, who is Josh Gibson? So I've heard my whole entire life about Michael Jordan. I've heard my entire life about Tom Brady. Well, who is this Josh Gibson guy? What?
Mm.
Oh, I can do that too. Oh, I can hit the ball and run bases and catch the ball. And guess what? It's not like football where you can get dementia from playing. I can play for a very long time. Don't be shocked that we see a resurgence of baseball being played inside of the urban areas throughout the country, and I'm happy to see it.
I want to jump in and mention Tony Stone.
Okay.
In the conversation too, being one of the first women pro baseball players in the Negro Leagues.
Yeah.
Of course, being a woman.
Right.
And I'm gonna challenge all of us to learn more about her story in the breadth of what's going on with Josh Gibson as well. This is why I love Mahmoud El-Kati. And we've got to get him in some of this conversation too, because just the history, just again, the convergence of our Black history and how sports has always been a part of that story. Because as people wanted to be quote unquote entertained, they realized that, wow, these Black folks they're very talented. they're very smart, and then they're, all these things, reaping the benefits of all of that for their fodder. But now realizing that if they, meaning the powers that be, want to have these records and want to prop up certain people, they're realizing that, oh, well, we forgot about it. And now we're not allowing them to forget about that because of the oral history as well as the written history that is there.
Yoji, what are your thoughts? How does it look from where you stand? And maybe there's a connection with capoeira as a not new, but as an emerging world activity in an arena where it was kind of a localized. Tell me about your thoughts.
Well, there's a slightly intersection with capoeira. I don't like much to promote what I do in public settings. But right now, in the world of capoeira, there is a fed of competition. Sport capoeira has become the norm in the style of UFC. And myself, I'm a member of the World Capoeira Federation, and I'm on the opposition inside of the federation. And we see nowadays in Brazil this proliferation of competition, some of of no quality, but some of them are trying to uplift capoeira in general to become more like a professional combative sport. Here in Brazil, what we see constantly in relationship with capoeira become a professional sport, that is in certain way that who benefit of all of this are not its originator, right? And also not the people from the area where capoeira originate and is predominant still today. So it's generally people of the south of Brazil that are more European oriented, and who are the owners of those outfits are Europeans or European Brazilians. But this is spreading worldwide now. The soon is gonna be, it's called Sport Fight Capoeira in the US. It's gonna be a professional capoeira competition, and is in Europe. So what I want to say, since we are a few minutes to go, it is yes, what is important to us in the world of sport. I'm a more of a soccer person. Yesterday, the three hooligans that were harassing Vini Jr. in Spain with racist chants, they got condemned. It's the first time in Europe and in Spain, particularly, that's a very racist country as far expressing in the soccer fields. This is the first time that some people got condemned and gonna be sent to jail, even though that racism is not characterized as a crime in the Spanish civil code, but they got in trouble, and it seems to be a new divided, water divided from yesterday, today, and before. So nowadays, the fight against racism is become much stronger in the world of soccer, where it's really blatant. And by the way, Vini Jr. is a good buddy of Jay-Z. Jay-Z went to Spain to watch the final of the Champions League. So, and the other thing about the Timberwolves is they went so well that even here in the newspaper of Bahia, they were talking about the Timberwolves. I was like, whoa, So that was very surprising to me, because I am a Minnesotan, and I was like, whoa, they mentioned the team from Minnesota, the basketball team from Minnesota in the newspaper. And this year, you're gonna have the first NFL game here, also in Brazil, in a few months.
Okay, well, that's a lot. Listen, this hour goes so quickly. We're out of time. Thomas Berry, Black Civic Network Program Director, Coach Leah, our sports editor, and Yoji Sena, editor for Afrodescendentes joining us from Salvador, Brazil, in Bahia. Thank you guys. Thank you all so much. And thank you all for listening here on KFAI and those who have connected with us around the world on our social media platforms. Remember to subscribe, like, and share. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care.